Stemmicht vertelleth by like besieben mo has ik het my familiar bestas sinnes is now.
Back to Growing Up Punk, the podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. It's David, just jumping in here real quick before we get into the episode. It's got me, Aaron, and Roger from No Motiv, because we're going to talk about No Motiv's Diagram for Healing, as well as Daylight Breaking. It's a ton of fun. It's a great conversation. But I did just want to say, before we get to that, we are now on Patreon. If you like what we do here at the show and you want to support it and you want to get more out of it, head on over to patreon.com/growingpunkpod, or you can just go to our website, find the link, growingpunkpod.com. For just $5 a month, you get so much more. You get all the regular episodes. Obviously, those are going to stay free. But if you join our Patreon, you get yourself bonus episodes. You get exclusive blogs, reviews, exclusive videos. We've got a private group chat that you can be a part of where we can talk about the show and all things punk rock, or just whatever. If you want to talk about your favorite sandwich meats, we can do that too. And some other goodies that are on the way as well. So again, patreon.com/growingpunkpod, or just head to growingpunkpod.com. Let's get into the interview, the episode, whatever you want to call it. It's Roger of No Motiv chatting with myself and Aaron on Growing Up Punk. This time I literally have plural friends that is, because usually it's just Aaron and I. So hello, Aaron. We'll do that first.
Yeah, what's
up? You heard a little chuckle there in the background. That would be Roger Camero of, well, a multitude of bands, but most importantly for this episode, for No Motiv, you've done, like, I was looking at this. We'll get into this a little bit, but you've literally played half of the instruments in No Motiv.
I have. It's weird.
Big deal.
Yeah, it's been fun.
No Motiv, a one-man band. I didn't know.
I tried to, with me being able to claim that I've played multiple instruments, I think everybody else, for the most part, can also say that.
Oh, there you go.
They've done the same. So,
well, there you go. So yeah, we're going to get into talking about a couple of No Motiv albums, Diagram for Healing and Daylight Breaking. We're going to talk about, and we kind of went with those because, well, Roger, I first met you because I had you on the show to talk about And the Sadness Prevails and the 20th anniversary of that, and I thought, well, we don't need to necessarily rehash that. Let's get some more details on other No Motiv records. So that's kind of where we're going to go. But before we get to that, we usually start the show by kind of, and I didn't prep you on this, Roger. So
no worries.
So let's see what happens. But we usually start the show sharing, kind of like some newer, because we talk about a lot of older music, so we like to share some newer music that we're listening to. But I also wanted to do this as just like this super cheesy, like softball lob, because you guys actually just released something within the last few weeks, like the first new music from No Motiv in what feels like forever.
That's correct.
Yeah. So how did that come about, real quick? The song's Archangel, but where did it come from, I guess?
The compilation itself that we're a part of, it's called Nardcore for Life. It's basically we call it like a family affair, because one of my close friends and bandmates in the band Retaliate, Zach Nelson, he was the one that kind of procured the entire compilation, and all of the, pretty much for the most part, all of the bands that are on the this comp filled with, I think, 36 bands, we're all part of the Nardcore family, the Oxnard, Ventura County punk rock scene. So there's other bands that haven't really been all that active in the past several years. One that comes to mind is the band In Control that Zach played guitar in. So for that band, they were like a pretty important part of the history of Nardcore. So with them kind of representing themselves on this compilation, and some of the more classic bands like Ill Repute and Stalag 13, we were asked if we wanted to contribute something, and the rules to the engagement were that you would have to contribute an unreleased song, and it would need to be 2 minutes or less because the compilation was put on vinyl, and to be able to get, like, I think there's 24 bands on the vinyl, 36 bands on the digital release. In order to fit all these songs, we kind of had to lay down some rules in order to have enough space on the vinyl for all these bands to be on. So we all the four of us discussed whether or not we'd be interested, and everybody was on board. So it was pretty simple, really. We were approached to be on the comp before we had gotten together to play the reunion shows last year. And so we were already kind of active again, practicing and all that stuff. And Max had written a couple riffs, which ended up becoming the song. And while we didn't really get to hash it out together as a band, we still all kind of contributed by doing our thing. It was kind of strange because we didn't really get many chances to practice for those two shows as a full band. I live about 2 hours from everybody else. I'm like kind of in the middle. Max is the most south of everybody in San Diego, and runs a custom woodworking company. So it was pretty hard for him to kind of break out of his schedule and life to get together, and for him it'd be like a 3 to 4 hour drive to go to practice. So we did a lot of the jamming as a 3-piece with Pat and Jeremy and I. So we didn't really have the luxury of being able to kind of hash it out old school style like together. So making the song was a little strange, but at the same time we're kind of used to it. That's kind of how we've had to operate in general, making music together, no motive or non-no motive related. So that's kind of how that happened.
It's pretty pumped to hear that there was new No Motive music. Didn't expect it, because I mean you mentioned sort of the reunion shows that you played last year, and there was, the re-release of And the Sadness Prevails, and then there's the EP that you kind of did, some updated versions or whatever of some songs. And so that's pretty sweet that there was new music in the works, and you surprised us all, or at least you surprised me. I don't know, maybe it was known everywhere, and I was just like living under a rock. But I was pretty pumped
kept
for
it under wraps pretty good. I mean, I think we alluded to some hints maybe around the time after we were finished playing those shows that we weren't done and that we'd be doing something, but we didn't really say what it was. So
sure.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's weird. We're like all very much in our own worlds. The other three dudes in the band are family men. They're dads and have kind of busy lives. And so when the compilation came out, what was it, 2 weeks ago maybe now, or last week?
Yeah, I think it was about 2 weeks ago.
We have like a band group text message thread going, and I think we're all so wrapped up in our lives that we didn't even acknowledge that, hey, this song that is the first song we've released in like almost a decade just got put out, and we didn't even like talk about it. It was kind of strange.
That's funny. I mean, the world's different as is, I think, for bands releasing music currently. And then here you guys are doing something for the first time, and because I think it's been almost 10 years. So that's pretty awesome. Aaron, what are you been listening to?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to the band Drag Dunder. They're a band we've talked about on here before, and we've given them good reviews. They released a new single called Just Like Me, and it's going to be on their deluxe version of their self-titled that came out at the beginning of this year. That comes out in November, I believe. So I think there's another new song that's going to be on there, and I love that band. If you liked their self-titled, or not self-titled, the last album they released, or their only album, I guess, then you will like this song. And so, yeah, it was also a nice surprise. They had posted on social media that they were going to be releasing something, and I didn't necessarily expect new music because, that was already this year that they put out that album. So, yeah, that's, I guess, one of the ways bands have to kind of adapt during this time, It maybe would seem kind of odd to release a deluxe version of your album within the same year that you released that one, but it's a good way to kind of push people that maybe didn't catch on to it first time or forgot about it or whatever. So yeah, I'm excited to hear that other new song as well.
Yeah, I tried to listen to it, but it's not on Apple Music yet anyway. So I guess
that's weird.
Is it on Spotify? Is that where you heard it, or did you get it on YouTube?
Yeah, it might have been. Yeah, it was on. Yeah, like a link for a video.
Yeah,
okay. They released a video for it too. So,
yeah, sweet. The record or band, I guess, that I want to mention is Low Tom. They released LP2, so their second full length. Specifically, the song "Outta Here." Now, Low Tom is David Bazan is kind of the guy behind Pedro the Lion, one of my favorite songwriters. I didn't even know this was coming out. I think maybe when it came out, I was like, oh yeah, I think I heard something about that, but I wasn't looking for it. But it's just kind of like a real good indie rock with big riffs, almost like classic rock sort of riffs and some big open guitars. I don't know. It's really good. I really dig it. And if you like, I guess strong songwriters. I don't know if that's how to describe it, but Dave Bazan, he's one of the best. I should say before we get into the episode proper, before we start talking about these two records today, go follow us on our social medias at Growing Punk Pod. You'll find us on Instagram and Twitter. Aaron and myself, you'll find our Twitters and Instagrams linked there as well. Roger, do you want to share yours?
Yeah, I would say the record that has made a deep impact that has been recently released is the band Be Well.
Oh, God. Yes. I don't know if you... Good. I was going to say real quick, as of when we're recording this, just yesterday, we released an interview with Brian McTernan of Be Well. Yeah, man, that record is beyond good. And it's one that came out of left field for me and had no idea it was coming. But yeah, share your thoughts real quick on that record.
I'm a huge McTernan fan in general, in terms of a songwriter and a producer. He's kind of been one of those huge influences on me growing up. Battery is a huge influence on No Motiv, really, and for me personally. So to have him have a new band that's along the kind of like a mature, to me it sounds like a somewhat more mature version of Battery, an older, wiser Battery, and of course his supporting cast of musicians is incredible. Shane and Peter from Fairweather, those are two absolute excellent musicians, great dudes. And who's the bass player? Aaron? All right, one of the guys from Bane's the bass player.
I was gonna say I know a guy from Bane is in the band, but I don't know names.
And then one of the guitar players from Darkest Hour. So it's kind of like an all-star band, and all those all the bands represented in this if it's a side project or if it's like a legit full-time band, it's just wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, it's so good. That record, the moment I put it on, I don't know how many times I've listened to it since it came out. It's fantastic. And Aaron claims that he told me about the band and the song, like one of the early release songs or whatever, and I was like,
I did.
I couldn't. Yeah, I was like, I don't remember that at all. So I clearly didn't follow the link. But so thank you, Aaron, for showing me Be Well.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Also, you can find us at growingpunkpod.com. We've got reviews, blogs, all sorts of stuff going on there. You can find the podcast there, but you can also find it on all your favorite podcast apps. So if you're listening somewhere that's not your favorite podcast app, go find it on your favorite podcast app. Anyway, let's get into these No Motiv records. Now, we're talking about these records because we just started... our listeners can't see this, but Aaron's wearing an MXPX hoodie right now. We just started a series. We've done one episode on MXPX, and I thought, to kind of break it up a little bit, let's do an episode where we talk about, maybe bands that we saw that opened for MXPX that we really came to love. And so, I mean, for me, immediately, No Motiv, you guys came to mind because... that's really the first time, and maybe Aaron can echo this, but that's really the first time that I can remember going and seeing a band, and the opening band, who I had no idea who they were, blew me away. And I actually came home from that show with No Motiv merch, but no MXPX merch. So I don't know, Aaron, what your initial memories were of seeing these guys.
Yeah, well,
MXPX.
That show was like kind of the first major kind of club show I went to. And so I think a part of me, like, I don't want to say wasn't paying attention to their bands because I did watch them, but, I was just so excited to see MXPX for the first time. But yeah, I remember, loving you guys and Too Bad Eugene on that show. And it was just cool, to see a band, that I hadn't really heard of before. At that point it was still kind of through music magazines or liner notes or whatever. And so it was just really cool to see a new band. And, I can't remember if I got an album then or if it was later on, but yeah, definitely a band that's kind of been through the plays over the years, and yeah, so it's cool to have you on after seeing you when I was, so that was in '99, so I was, yeah, it would have been 15, so it's only taken 20 years to see you face to face again. So nice to see you again.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, Roger, real quick, what was your first impression of seeing No Motiv open for MXPX?
Oh man, I'm trying to think what was the actual first show that we ever played with those dudes.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we had to drive all the way up to Seattle to start the tour.
Right.
So I'm assuming it was Seattle, or maybe it was even Spokane where we played our first show with them. And so man, it was pretty surreal. I mean, I'm not that much older than you dudes, and so like when 99 I was I think I turned 18 on that tour.
Wow.
Oh, crazy.
And so I was listening to the same bands that you guys were. And so, going to high school, listening to MXPX, it was a trip. Just like all the other bands that we were lucky enough to tour with at a young age, namely like Good Riddance and Face to Face. So being in that position to be able to do a tour with MX was pretty wild. I think being at the age that I was and these kind of new experiences, it was a lot to take in. I was pretty intimidated by the whole thing. So
for sure. So you guys would have been touring the album And the Sadness Prevails. So we're going to talk about the album that came after that, which is Diagram for Healing. I myself was excited for this record because, as I mentioned, I went and saw you guys with MXPX, bought And the Sadness Prevails, listened to it, loved it. Like, it was something new to me as far as, kind of what I was familiar with and what I was really listening to, because to that point, it was a lot more of your straightforward kind of pop punk, skate punk sort of stuff. And you guys sort of opened some doors with, kind of some of the sounds you were experimenting with at the time. So when Diagram for Healing came out, I was, like, I was in store buying it sort of day it came out or what have you, and it was really the start of my super enjoyment of Vagrant Records. Like, that was kind of like right in I want to say maybe right before Vagrant really, maybe you can speak to this, but right before they kind of really took off, or right around then anyway.
It was right around the time. I mean, but once Diagram had come out, I think they already had the Get Up Kids. They had
Yeah.
Saves the Day, an Alkaline Trio. So the machine was definitely going full steam ahead, and yeah, there was definitely a difference in terms of the label's ability to promote the band and to help get us, you know, just we were able to piggyback on so much because of the roster and how well kind of putting all these bands together went over, the Vagrant America tours and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was a wild time. Watching the label grow before our eyes was a wild experience. And
Yeah.
for it to happen at the age that we were at, I, in hindsight, wish we were just like, I don't know, 3-4 years older, so that we were able to really kind of appreciate things on a more mature level. Because me having turned 18 on the tour that you saw us, Max was probably 15 or something like that.
That's insane.
And Jeremy and Pat probably had just turned 21 or somewhere in that time frame, so I don't know if everybody would agree with my feelings, my sentiment about this. I think that we probably took quite a bit for granted, being that we were so young and seeing the progression of everything. It was almost like, I guess this is normal. This is just how it works, right? And not until years upon years later could we really step back and kind of look at the big picture and all the opportunities that we were afforded, having been a part of Vagrant and basically being their baby band. I think I wish I appreciated what they had done for us in a higher level, like back then, as I do now.
Because you guys were were you the first band they signed, or one of the first bands they signed?
We were one of the first bands. We weren't the first band.
Yeah.
I think the first band that they signed was the Go to Hells, and they put out one record, and then after that they signed a band called Boxer.
Yeah.
And I believe they also put out one record. And so I'm pretty sure by the time No Motiv was a full-time touring band, and especially by the time we put out Diagram, I think that we were the only like original band left on the roster, and from there it was the Get Up Kids, and then obviously it just kind of skyrocketed from there.
I remember my first impressions about this album being, holy, they sound so much more polished, because there's just an overall, like, it's hard for me to explain like the progression from Sadness to this album in just overall. It feels like it's almost more like it's more of a simple sound. I don't know if that's accurate or not, or if that's just how the production kind of pulls it off. But I just remember also feeling that the record sounds more happy. When I look at the lyrics, I don't know if that's necessarily true across the board, but it has a happier sound than obviously Sadness, which is ironic that it's called Sadness. But so what kind of do you find that yourself, that it kind of has that a very different sort of No Motiv feel, but still No Motiv? Absolutely.
I think I might be able to explain some of that as well.
That's why you're here.
So with the thing about the 3 records on Vagrant, they were all recorded at the same studio. The studio itself had made some significant changes in its layout from Sadness into Diagram. So when we recorded Sadness, it was recorded to tape, no editing, just about as raw as you can get. The drum room where we tracked Sadness eventually became the control room where the mixing console was for Diagram and all the other stuff after that. So after that, they had built a much larger drum room. So that kind of explains the difference in like the drum sounds themselves. And from like in terms of the guitar tones on Sadness, I think we leaned heavily on Max and Jeremy's amps that they were playing for years already.
Right.
And on Diagram, I believe Trevor kind of unleashed the fury with his own. He brought his own arsenal of amps for them to kind of integrate into the recording, and I think it was kind of maybe the climate of music was changing and it was getting more and more poppy. By the time we were writing Diagram, Blink had obviously created a whole new era of pop punk,
Yeah.
so to speak, and MXPX was very much a part of that. And so those two bands were I'd say they were kind of a heavy influence on us, as well as like the classics like Face to Face. But I think especially like a band like MXPX, where you have somebody like Tom who wasn't playing like super metallic guitar tones. He was kind of like he was playing like a more classic overdriven amp sound, and I think that was like that had been an influence on somebody like Max. I know that when we toured with them, the tone was like a big thing that we took away from that experience, and a big influence. So so the change in style is probably largely due to the influence our peers had on us at that point, and maybe our desire to always kind of progress and not do the same thing over and over again. I think
Totally. Yeah.
whether that's to our detriment or to whatever, I mean, we could never make the same record twice. Even before I joined the band, like everything the band has ever released has sounded vastly different from from release to release.
Aaron, do you remember your first kind of impressions of this record?
No, and I don't even know when I would have gotten this. Like the year this came out, I mean, I was still living in a small town, so the store in the mall that sold CDs didn't really ever have anything cool, especially from smaller labels like Vagrant. And I know in that scene it would have been a bigger one, but for bringing into a small town where three of us were going to buy those albums. So I don't know. I feel like I heard more songs like on compilations and stuff than I did the full album until, I don't know when that would have been, probably a few years even after, maybe even the next album. I can't remember exactly. I remember seeing you guys' name on a lot of compilations, and today I was just looking it up on Spotify, and they had a bunch of those compilations on there that I had, and so that's probably more so kind of how I familiarized myself with your new music kind of over those years.
Real quick, before we get into some of the songs, Roger, maybe you can give us a bit of insight on the artwork on this album. Do you know, so what was... I guess was there a concept that you guys had going in, or was it just sent off to someone, or because the look of that artwork is very Vagrant Records of the time, I find, which makes me think that they kind of maybe sent it out. But can you fill us in a bit on it?
I'm looking at it right now. I have a framed promo poster of it. So,
Oh, nice.
excuse me. The the 3 albums that Vagrant put out, well, basically from Sadness all the way to Winterlong, we worked with our good friend Gabe Cano to do the art on all of those records, and so I believe it's pretty much on Jeremy in terms of like the concept behind every album cover that we've done. The girl on the cover itself is actually Jeremy's wife's sister.
Oh, cool.
And I think the whole kind of broken up kind of look of it, almost like kind of like shattered glass in a way. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's kind of depicting like, you know, there being a heart on the CD itself, and this image of this woman. It's kind of like, if you think about Sadness and just kind of how depressing and dark it is musically, sonically, and visually, I think perhaps Jeremy wanted to have some sort of contrast to that. And so, like you were saying, the music itself is considerably poppier and perhaps happier sounding. Yeah. And lyrically, yeah, there's still a lot of darkness and struggle going on lyrically, but I could say perhaps that on an album like Sadness, where I would say every song is kind of spoken, written from Jeremy's personal experiences in life. Diagram is more kind of like a documentation of not only his own experiences, but kind of bringing in the stories of maybe some of us in the band, kind of singing about us and singing about things that our friends have experienced. And so it was just a whole new light in how he wanted to approach things lyrically. And so I think that all played a part in why this album cover is the way it is. And of course, the change in the music climate, the things, the sound getting poppier, the image getting a little more, I don't know what the term would be, fashionable in a way. I'm not sure, but we really never wanted, and I don't think we did really try to exploit that side of things. But I can remember that that's when things started to get a little strange, where companies like Hurley would partner up with punk bands and and then, you know, bring in Vans and other skate companies. That seemed like more of, it wasn't the birth of how music and action sports and branding kind of came to be one, but I know that has started before this whole era, but it seemed like it was such a huge part in how things ended up becoming what they did in years to come after this release in this particular year of music.
Yeah. Let's get into some of the songs that were picked. First one being Broken and Burned. Aaron, what were your kind of initial thoughts or your notes that you had on this one?
So this one kind of the whole album reminds me. So here's what I kind of broke it down to genre wise. It reminds me of 90s grunge alternative mixed with punk rock roots and emo undertones. So I know it's a whole handful, but that kind of, as I was listening through this, you know, like there'd be parts where it's like, oh, that just reminds me of more of kind of like a 90s alternative band, but then the chorus is, you know, really catchy and has, you know, more punk, and then some of the verses on the songs, you know, maybe some more of those emo undertones. Yeah, and this one I just found, it was a really interesting song. I love the variation of the sound and the dynamics, and I just really like the song overall.
Yeah, I one of my notes that kind of keeps coming up a few times is that you guys, like, as a band, you really leaned into, I guess, like the quiet, loud dynamic. At least what I noticed it felt like is, you might have a quieter start or like a bit of a louder start, go quiet and then go loud and kind of stay loud for the end, but there was this real like dynamic push. And I mean, that's my very first note on this is that it's got a hard hitting intro, but then it quiets down for the verse and then it kind of comes back in. And I think was this one of the ones that you picked, Roger, as one of your songs? I should have written that down.
I believe so. I think I was torn between Broken and Break It Down.
Yeah.
I think I ended up picking Break It Down, and then the more I thought about it, I was like, maybe I should have picked Give Me Strength, because that seems to be a song that has had a lot of impact on life itself. But
yeah,
I think I think I picked Break It Down because of me wishing that it had more attention brought to it. But anyway, we'll get to that later. But Broken and Burn, I try to get opinions from the dudes about these songs and these two albums, and one of the things that both Pat and Max said was that song kind of wrote itself. We were just jamming, and I honestly forget who wrote the intro lead. It's likely Max came up with that. And if you think about it, it kind of sounds like jamming, like mellow jamming, because we start off with this intro and kind of hammer on that for a while, and then yes, you're absolutely right about the dynamics, the loud, quiet, loud thing. I would say that's largely bands like Pixies and Nirvana.
Yeah,
most definitely kind of were huge on that with that sort of thing. And I think around this era of time, Face to Face had already released Ignorance is Bliss, and that was also kind of a large influence on us, especially obviously Trevor producing this record. I think these are all things that we thought about and things that we were inspired by. And so the whole thing from going from loud to the quiet verse and having me kind of just make a bass line and those dudes kind of riffing quiet, clean. There's just so many influences that come into play, or that I can think of, like Sunny Day Real Estate. If you want to bring up like the emo kind of influence, they were a huge one for us, and maybe Far is another huge influence on us. So I'm just trying to think about back then, like what might have driven us to write a song that way, but it kind of wrote itself.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, for this record and Sadness, I also think that was kind of, I mean, that was for sure part of your sound, and maybe that just always was part of your sound, even when I think about Daylight Breaking, which we'll get into a little bit more. But yeah, like as I mentioned with Sadness, in the world of like kind of music that I was mainly listening to at that point, it was offering something very different, but also, something that was overly familiar. Is with when Aaron said, with the quiet verses kind of reminding him of, like 90s alternative or whatever, or maybe more emo, and then these like straight up kind of like pop punk, more anthemic, big, catchy choruses. It was opening doors, I think. At least for my ears, it was opening doors. But let's get into the next song that was on the list, which is Get a Life. This song, for me, I picked this one, and I know because there are a couple songs on this record that just have always stood out for me. And with this one, the guitar riff that gets played, like the lead riff, it's super simple, and all I can think of to like explain it is it just feels like this. You talked about, the guy saying that Broken and Burned kind of wrote itself. Like with Get a Life, it feels like that lead riff just wrote itself. It's like, yep, this is what I'm doing. This is where I'm going. And it's always been a song that kind of stood out to me. Aaron, what were some of your notes on that one?
Yeah, this one definitely kind of reminded me of a kind of a modern take on more old school pop punk. Those simple chords reminded me kind of almost like Ramones' Screeching Weasel, something like that. Just that kind of simple guitar pattern, but it's super catchy. But it's got more depth and layers than those bands ever really had, and so that makes it more of an interesting song. It's got a really catchy and memorable chorus, which seems to be what kind of, at least for me, really carried the song kind of through to the end. I like at the end it kind of adds, I don't know if you call it gang vocals, but kind of more people singing that part at the end, and so it kind of finishes that last chorus and brings it through the end of the song. And I've said it a lot on this podcast that a lot of the bands we talk about, it might be more simple, structured songs and musically, but if you have the right layers and depth and dynamics in a song, it can be a really interesting song. And I think this is one of those.
Totally. I wanted to point out real quick, just in kind of the talking about, going from sadness sounding more sad than, this record sounding more happy. The line in this song that says, "I'll write this sad song the wrong way and leave out the happy ending." I think it's just like, it's kind of this perfect fit, because when you look at the lyrics, I don't know that they got, any necessarily, for the most part, any brighter or happier, but they sound happier. So it's like you're writing the sad song the wrong way, sort of thing. It's pretty great.
It's definitely has a melancholy kind of vibe to it. I've made some notes. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Another Year on the Streets version of this song.
Oh, okay. So I was going to bring up Another Year on the Streets, but I didn't realize it was different.
Mm-hmm. So,
okay.
I tried to find it on Spotify. I believe somebody made a playlist of the songs that are on it, and they pulled it from the record, which aren't the actual the versions that are on the comp. So the comp, we Celebrate and Get a Life were brand new songs for us. They both ended up being on the record. But we recorded those with Chad Blinman. So he played the part of the producer and the engineer, whereas Trevor produced the full length and Chad, and him mixed the record. But the ending of the song, that whole backup chorus thing, the get a new life thing, originally it went so good, so good, so good, so good, instead of get a new life. And when we recorded it that time, I remember vividly, after we submitted it and then we went to go re-record it for the album, both Trevor and Rich, the owner of Vagrant, were like, there is absolutely no way you are going to use so good as your backup for this last chorus. So I do remember that call being made, and that get a new life would be the catchphrase at the end of the song, which is funny to think about. So yeah, if anybody can find that old compilation version, that's definitely different. And we actually recorded Celebrate and Get a Life at this place called King Sound, where Diagram was mixed. So that's a little interesting tidbit. I can't ever listen to that song and not chuckle when I hear him sing about us getting to go to New Jersey.
Yeah.
Because of our years of touring and whatever memories we have, I do remember every time that we got to go to New Jersey, we would have such a great time, whether it was making friends or having great shows. But never once did I think about how strange of a state New Jersey really is. And I always kind of, not that I'm not talking shit about New Jersey. It's a very unique state, very unique place, but it was almost like this golden place to No Motiv. And it wasn't until the later years after touring with Motiv and kind of moving on to other bands, or like when I was touring with RX. RX is a perfect example because it's like I would be so excited to go to New Jersey when RX Bandits would have a show there, and they'd be like, "What the fuck are you excited about going to New Jersey for? Like, we can't ever turn left. What are you excited about?" And like, it's funny. It's just funny to think about. But yeah. The musical influence and the tones of that song, all I can really think about is that hoodie that you're wearing.
There you go. So MXPX.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
That would be, if there was a song that was most definitely MX influenced, I would say "Get a Life" is probably up
That's
there.
sweet.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
Awesome.
So let's move on to then I guess the next song, which was one that you mentioned earlier, Roger. Let's break it down. So I guess before we get into why this is one of your favorites off the album, I guess Aaron, did you have any notes on this one?
Yeah, so we did a series on Alkaline Trio, and one of the things that came up with them that reminded me of your band as well as just that really awesome line, or that balance between dark and pop sensibilities. And so I love the moments on this album and this song. And I think this song is one of those where, it's like one part it's like, okay, this is, kind of darker, but then it just kind of totally changes it around, and it just makes the song really interesting because you don't always, it's a bit harder to predict. There's lots of really cool vocal things on this song, and even just simple parts like where he sings, "I think it's time," like just kind of those little shifts in the way you pronounce words, make the song stand out, and lots of cool parts on this song. And so just between the dark and poppy and the little vocal hooks and all those things that just make it a really good song.
Yeah, I often. And like with No Motiv, and then you brought up Alkaline Trio, they were kind of like these two bands that I sort of lumped together in similar sounds. Like you didn't sound like each other, but you both to me felt like that you represented the best part of like the Vagrant Records thing for me,
Yes.
where it was like that meeting of, yes, you have some obvious emo sort of influences in here with punk rock. Now, obviously the Alkaline Trio, they got a little darker with some of their lyrics, which was always a nice sort of twist or whatever. But why is this song one of your favorites off this record?
I think I really like the sense of urgency in Jeremy's vocals, and we never really got to play this song all too much live, and I would say that's because if you were ever to see them play the riffs, it's like the most ridiculous finger stretching in order to make the chords happen. And I'm just thinking about the song in the music standpoint. It was just a lot of fun to write. It was a lot of fun. The bass line was fun to play, and I just remember hearing Jeremy. Hearing the playback for the first time after he had recorded the vocals to it, and kind of being blown away by the energy and like the amount of heart that comes through in the song, and I kind of never forgot that, and so that's probably why I wanted to pick it, because there's like I was saying, maybe I should have picked a song like "Give Me Strength" because it's had much more of an impact on maybe like in general on people's lives and for us as a band. But like I feel like "Break It Down" is maybe one of those songs that maybe was never really saw much attention, and I just wanted to talk about it just because.
That's fair. Because I think last time we talked, you had mentioned that with Sadness, the kind of change in sound was that the guys had kind of learned and discovered what you called ugly chords.
Yes, absolutely.
So were you just describing an ugly chord?
Oh, yeah.
There, yeah.
One of probably the most extreme ugly chord progression.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so the last track off this album we're going to talk about is "Born Again." So this was one of my picks, and I've always loved this song. Like as a closer, I think it closes the album really well. It plays with that quiet, loud dynamic again, but I think almost more extreme. Like the quiet on this song is more. I don't even know the right word to describe it, but it's even quieter.
Yeah.
As it's gentle almost as Jeremy starts singing, kind of the chorus to start the song. And I love that too, that it starts with the chorus, but it starts with a quiet version of the chorus.
Yep.
And then it gets stuck in my head regularly. In fact, probably every time I'm starting a fire, like we're getting ready to roast some marshmallows or whatever, I'm singing, I set the fire ablaze. But
That's awesome.
yeah. And the finish on this song just is so kind of intense when like those octave chords just get hammered or whatever towards the end. It's such a great song. Aaron, I know you're not as big of a fan of like kind of slower songs, but what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, similar to yours. I was interested to hear just on, was it, kind of how intentional was it for you guys, in picking that closing song? Was that a conscious thing, or was it just kind of, a least favorite song, or whatever one just kind of happened to be at the end? Or because I've brought that up a few times on the show. Just I love having a good closer, and that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be like some high energy closer, but just something that wraps up the album well. It's memorable enough to just make you think, okay, that was a good listen, and just kind of makes you kind of think about the songs or meditate on it or whatever. And so, what was that like? Putting together a track listing and picking this for the last song.
That's a great question, because I think we really truly cared about this album sequences. And being the kind of band that we've been, we're like about as schizophrenic of a band as I can imagine. But in terms of that song being the closer, I don't know if this is actually true. This is what Max said, and I didn't get a chance to run this by Jeremy, but we're pretty sure that he had written Born Again just to write a song, and I don't know if he necessarily ever thought that the band would want to use it as a No Motiv song. And you could kind of like, you could spot a Jeremy song from a mile away. Like, they're usually the ones that have just the straight da-na-na-na-na-na kind of picking, real straightforward, real cruising. I'm pretty sure he wrote Get Alive, and like Solemn, like those sort of songs.
Yeah.
So, if you're thinking about how Born Again starts, just imagine Jeremy sitting in his bedroom writing it on an acoustic guitar, and then us having to turn it into a punk ballad or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I don't want to speak for Jeremy, but I'm pretty sure that the lyrics kind of bring up a lot of personal things that maybe not necessarily he was struggling with. He might have been singing about friends or people that that were close to us, and kind of touching on the struggles of kind of growing up and the things that we go through in life. And so it seems like we've always saved some of the most deeply emotional songs for last on every record. Like, we really wanted to end it on that note every time. And so, especially a song like Born Again, I like, where else can we put this song on this particular record? So
I also like the the intro you talked about, just the guitar work on the intro has always been so. I've just loved it. Like there's the little bends that are happening that are just so subtle, and I don't know. I think it all comes together so well. This record is actually one of my probably all-time favorite. I've put it on different lists where I'm like, oh, what is like when we went back and did our quarantine episodes and we were talking about, records that you think, which you were on, Roger, like records that you think people need to check out. This was one of mine because it's always been one of my favorites, and I always just feel like, in the Vagrant world, there were a number of big bands. Like you mentioned the Get Up Kids, obviously Dashboard Confessional, Alkaline Trio. Like there were some pretty big bands, and then you guys were like always there and just always kind of this band where I'm like, yeah, but what about these guys? Like these guys are awesome. They're incredible. So it's always been one of my favorites. But we're going to move on to the second album we're going to talk about, which was the follow-up to this. That'd be Daylight Breaking. I bought this record the same day. This is kind of funny. This ties back to when we were listening to some of the new music we're listening to, because I bought this record the same day I bought Pedro the Lion Control, which is also one of my all-time favorites. That was a great day for purchasing new music. I don't know, but this one is interesting for me, and I'm most interested to hear about this record because there were a few things that went on here. I will, like, up front, I'll say this record took a few more listens for it to grow on me personally.
I could imagine.
Yeah, well, and so obviously you guys got heavier in sound, and it felt like you went. If Diagram for Healing was happier than Sadness Prevails, at least in overall sound, this kind of went back to not being happy, but maybe more angry in sound and less sad. Like, I don't know. It's just, there's this neat kind of progression that you guys had. And obviously, we mentioned earlier that you've played multiple instruments in the band because what did you play on this record? Because I'm confused by a couple of different things.
Well, I should talk about the transition from Diagram to making Daylight and what the band ended up becoming eventually, because I think we were, from record to record, literally the 3 records, whether it was life or some sort of circumstance, something always kept us from just being a band that tours, album cycle, tour, just make a record, tour forever, make a record, tour forever. There was always something that kept us from keeping the train moving. And so that's why there's, I guess, from Sadness to Diagram, it wasn't a huge time frame, 99 to 2001. So 1 year where we didn't put out a record, but sure, we were probably touring a bit more. But when 9/11 happened, we were on tour in Denver, and just the whole experience and everything that happened afterwards, we had been touring quite a bit, and that happening while we were on tour really shook us to the point that we kind of felt like we needed to take a step back and reconnect with ourselves and our families. It kind of brought that life is fragile mentality to us in our personal lives. And so, a lot of things happen. I think we were feeling, with every record, it's like we latched onto something and felt like we needed to move on and try something new and progress. But in particular, from Diagram to Daylight, as much as we were connecting with and we're a part of the pop punk scene, and I guess the emo scene, just because we were on Vagrant, and I think sometimes we're a hard band to categorize in general. We are now entering our mid-20s and the beginning our journey into more of adulthood, more, I guess, maturity. as songwriters. And so I think between Max, Jeremy, and I, we started to have this vision of where we would like to take the band and where we'd want to progress. And I think for the most part, Pat was a little more wanting to stick to the formula of what was working for us. And we just weren't feeling it. And with the amount of time that we had taken off of tour and what seemed like a lack of interest in wanting to, maybe not a lack of interest, but a lack of inspiration to get the machine going again. Pat ended up joining another band called From Satellite during this time. And he was wanting to try to do both bands. And at the time, we just didn't really take very well to that whole dynamic shift. And it was an interesting time because around then, we were sharing our practice space, which was also like doubled as my recording studio, and I shared it with another close friend who's an engineer and who ended up being in From Satellite, my friend Armand. And so everything just seemed, the energy shifted and everything was changing. And eventually, even though we started writing Daylight, we could tell like the energy was just different, and things got a little complicated because at that point in time we were we were being managed and we were being offered the ideas and roads to leaving Vagrant and getting on like a major label. And so that entire experience was really strange for us. It was like half of us were like, of course, why wouldn't we want to see what new opportunities could be out there for us? But at the same time, it's like, and being dudes that grew up listening to punk music and hardcore music and those things being important to us, it was kind of like, at least for me personally, like a weird experience that didn't totally feel right. And long story short, we played showcases, we did demos, we did these things to try to get off of Vagrant and go to a new label, and none of that worked out. None of it felt right for the most part. Maybe there was a couple of cool experiences that I could share about that in that weird time, but overall it was just kind of awkward and strange. And with that, we felt like we were kind of musically growing apart from Pat. And so the gist of it is that we ended up writing the majority and recording nearly most of Daylight Breaking as a 3-piece. And so we started off, we had written a few songs that never saw the light of day, thank God. It was an awkward growing pain of like kind of moving away from the super poppy sound into I don't know. It just, if I'm trying to put it to something, it was kind of like really boring, slow tempo Bad Religion. And it just felt weird. But anyway, after we got all of that out of our system, the first few songs that were written for Daylight were Independence Day and Into the Darkness. And I bring those up because Pat was still in the band.
Okay.
I wrote those on acoustic guitar, brought them to the band. Everybody was jiving. We demoed it. Those were the last two songs Pat played on, as far as I can remember. And those demos, you know, they were like the turning point. They were the gateway into just like experimenting with new stuff. And by the time we started really working on Daylight, yes, we told Pat that we wanted to move on without him, and we just wanted to make the record. It wasn't like, Pat, you're out, I'm going to be the new drummer. It was just like, hey, dude, I think you want to probably focus on From Satellite, and we probably want to go in a different direction than where you want to go. At least that's what we felt back then. And so that's what we did. And for, I don't know, however many months it took for the three of us to write the rest of Daylight, we would just set up at our practice space, and I couldn't tell you who was playing what on some of these songs as we wrote them, because the three of us can, all four of us really can play every instrument. So when it came down to recording, sure, I played drums on almost all the songs except for one, but we shared bass duties between Jeremy, Max, and I, and later Jeff. But it seemed like, it felt like we had although we didn't necessarily have a vision, we were all working on the same wavelength. We were really connecting, and everything was happening very naturally. And the kind of ironic thing about it is that in our minds, we felt like we were writing the most rebellious to everyone record. We were writing the record that the three of us wanted to write, and we just didn't want to think about anything else other than pleasing ourselves. And by then, we, whatever weirdness was going on with Vagrant, we kind of patched that up and told them, hey, we're back in the saddle, let's just do this. And we were very lucky that we went to the label and said, hey, we don't want a producer. We've been demoing our own music since Sadness, and I think by now we feel like we could just make this record ourselves. Back then, I thought I was I thought I was experienced enough and knew enough that I could engineer the record, and like, whether, I don't think I was necessarily convinced that I'd end up mixing the record. I think we kind of decided we would hand that off regardless. And so that kind of afforded us all of this freedom to make this record literally by ourselves in the same studio that we made the other two records. And it was interesting. We took full advantage of our freedom in the studio. We probably could have made the record like in an eighth of the time that it actually took us to do it. But I think we were just in our mid-20s, really feeling lucky and wanting to just do the whole, let's move into the studio for a month and make a record. And sure, we recorded all the music to the record in a month, but it took us probably 6 months to record the vocals after that, which we ended up recording at our lockout studio in Ventura. But then we also recorded here where I live now in Irvine, just in a bedroom. We just set up shop, turned 2 rooms, one into the control room, one into the vocal booth, and we just came here every couple weeks or every month and try to get whatever we could and try to keep as much focus. But imagine not having a producer and realizing like, oh, this is what a producer does. They not only like offer ideas, they crack the whip and make sure that we do all this stuff and not take literally half a year to make a record. But it was quite the experience. And so, we made most of the record by ourselves, the three of us. And to us, when we handed it to Vagrant, we're like, here's the record. The three of us made it. I'm probably going to become the drummer and we'll get a bass player. Or maybe I think we might have sorted that out before we handed in the record. But the label came back and they said, this is awesome. We love all of this. here's the thing. You recorded Brand New Day already. Why doesn't it sound like that version? And we were like, oh, you literally want it exactly like that version, which is a very strange thing to think about because Brand New Day was the one song that survived our moment of time where we wanted to leave Vagrant and find a new label. And so that was like our leading song to use to try to find a new label. And it was actually a song, I think, written about leaving Vagrant.
That's interesting.
And if you ever watch that video of of it, Pat's obviously in the band, and the recording is not the album recording. That recording of the song was produced and mixed by John Feldman of Goldfinger.
Yeah. Okay.
So
interesting.
When we recorded that song, we actually re-recorded The Waiting Hurt with him also. That version has not seen the light of day, and I'm not quite sure if it will, but it is as polished as you could ever imagine that song being.
Yeah.
And if you saw us play with like later on with me on the drums, I think we played it in that way of what Feldman did to the song. But anyway, back to Brand New Day. The label wasn't stoked on how it came out. I think we either made it slower, changed a couple things dynamically about it, and they were like, this is an important song on this record. You got to go back in the studio and re-record it. And we're like, oh, okay. All right. We'll try to recreate this, even though we had no idea what the hell we were doing. And yeah, by then we decided I'd be the drummer. We had Jeff join the band. And so he ended up playing on Brand New Day. And when we went to go record that song, I think Jeremy or Matt, I forget who, either Max or Jeremy came to the studio, or right before we went into the studio, we're like, I got another new song. Maybe we could add it to the record. And that song ended up being Laid to Rest. So if you ever listen to Daylight and you listen to Brand New Day and Laid to Rest, they are from a completely different recording session. And those are the two songs that Jeff played bass on because he had technically already joined the band by then.
Right.
But
interesting.
But the rest of the record we did as a 3-piece. And it's just so ironic to think about what our mentality was going into making this record and how it was received by the label. Because obviously Vagrant was like a well-oiled machine that had created themselves an empire. And I think they truly felt like this is the record that Motives made, that if they were going to become like a modern rock radio band, this could be the record. And to us, we were like, okay, I guess, if you guys think so, then sure. We kind of thought we were writing the anti-rock radio rock record, but if that's what this actually sounds like to everybody, then sure, whatever. I mean, let's just do it. And so that's kind of the story behind why and how that record came to be. Sounds the way it does, and the songwriting's so different is because it's very simple between three dudes.
Yeah.
And just kind of sharing the duties of like sculpting the songs and sharing bass duties between the three of us.
Yeah. Aaron, what were your thoughts on this record when you put it on for study?
I listened through it today after the one we just talked about, and lots of like similar things. It's still dark and poppy, and lots of great melodies and harmonies to it, and It's interesting hearing all kind of the backstory to it, because I probably wouldn't have pieced all that together in there. And it's a really enjoyable listen, and there was a lot of the songs that I went back to right away and listened to again because they were just so good. And I feel like it's a really good follow-up album.
So let's then get into, I guess, some of the songs that we picked. The first one being "Into the Darkness." Now, you, Roger, you just mentioned something about this song. I feel it was a little while ago now, but you're. Were you saying it was written? Was this one of the ones that was written early on?
Yeah, it was one of the first songs that I wrote for the record. Pat was still in the band. We had demoed it with him in the band,
Right.
and there's little weird snippets of sounds. If you listen to Daylight, there's a lot of weird backwards vocals.
Yeah, okay.
And sounds.
I did have a note. I was like, man, and especially a number of the songs that we picked, I was like, oh, there's like some kind of weird like talking, whispering, I just feel like you guys are trying to make me like buy a new car or something. Like it's
okay.
Subliminal messaging is going on here, but what is the story behind that? Because it does come up a few times.
I think being in the three of us kind of locking ourselves away and just getting weird in the studio.
Yeah.
Our music influences have been very vast throughout the years, and I know for sure around this time, Neurosis album Times of Grace was a huge influence on us, and it's one of the creepiest records ever. We were spending a great deal amount of time together, probably watching weird movies. One of them namely being the movie Audition, which we'll obviously get into that song later. But I think we just really wanted to explore the idea of weird, and with the backwards vocal stuff, it just felt like, let's just do odd stuff that only we will know what is actually being said. If somebody were if you were to go through all the hassle of putting the song into some sort of music production program and reverse the entire song, you would be able to hear what he's saying. Probably, but right. I'm not going to let out what that.
Come on, man.
I did make some notes about the song. Like I said, it was one of the really three songs that we had while Pat was in the band: Brand New Day, Independence Day, Into Darkness. It's a song that ended up getting a radio mix that you can hear on the video. If you watch the video, I think the first chorus goes twice. Something like that. Every time I hear this song, I just think about Jawbreaker, Dear You era. With the palm muting, the low vocal with the high vocal. This was the song that Vagrant chose to be like the front runner to represent the band and to represent the record. I forget if it was Vagrant or our manager, Kent Sorrell, got Darkness to be like the theme song for the X Games in 2004, I think.
Yeah, that's sweet.
So it's funny because I hadn't listened to either of the records in a while, and I laughed out loud on numerous occasions at like how wildly different these two records are and the things Jeremy was doing with his vocals. But so when we were demoing this song, I recorded all the demos. It was always just Jeremy and I, most likely in the middle of the night, locked away in the studio. I think I remember when he demoed this song, we came out and the sun was out, which happened more frequently than not. But it was probably our first exploration into taking things very far with the amount of vocal tracks or tracks in general. If you listen to that record in particular, there's like so much crap going on, and it's just we just wanted to because we could, because there wasn't anybody to tell us no. But like when we demoed that song, all those ridiculous amount of harmonies, that's the birth of that whole idea. And it's kind of become, if you listen to anything we did afterwards, it's like, seems like it was an important part of the puzzle. But I remember when we had to go record the song for real, I think we had to do it a couple different times because, as you know, Jeremy's voice has changed considerably throughout the years from the 7 inches to where we're at now.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that the song was a lot harder for him to sing by the time we were recording the record because he had written it maybe in at a key or way that is harder to do. So it was quite the battle to get that song done, but he did it, and there's a lot of vocals, and you hear them. But yeah, that's what I got for Darkness.
Yeah. Aaron, did you get a chance to see the music video for this one?
No, I didn't today. No.
It's always because yeah. Jumping back real quick, you guys didn't have any videos on Diagram, did you? I don't think I've seen any.
No, we didn't do any.
But so you had, I think, 2 on this one, which we talk about both songs. But this video reminds me of. Did you ever? I'm sure you've seen the video for "Got You Where I Want You" by the Flies. Do you remember that song?
I don't.
It was off of. I think its biggest thing was on "Disturbing Behavior." It was like on that soundtrack or whatever. It's like there's like, anyways, there's these. The band is playing on the edge of this cliff, and all like these kids, these high school kids, are running, and they're like lemmings off the cliff, right?
Yeah.
So it just kind of reminded me of that a little bit. But Aaron, what were your thoughts on Into the Darkness?
Yeah, this is an awesome song. This is one of the ones that I immediately went back to and listened to again just because it was so many kind of cool parts. And yeah, I definitely recognized or picked up on kind of the eerie feel to the vocals, especially in that kind of that first verse where it's just, the bass and the vocals. And so, yeah, I was intrigued to hear kind of where the song was going to go from there. But, I mean, it's got a really catchy chorus and lots of great melody and harmonies, which I love. Oftentimes that's what will make a song for me, and so yeah, I thought this was a great track.
The bridge into, I don't know if it's the final chorus or whatever, but just the way it kind of like sort of comes back a little bit on the bridge, and then just punches you right in the face to come back into that choruses, and it's kind of done in a different sort of way, if I remember correctly. Like it feels like it doesn't. I don't think it just stops and then hits you. Like maybe you guys throw a little reverse effect of something underneath.
There's a little
like a swell almost.
Reverse vocal swell that goes into there.
Yeah.
The pause that happens with the music wasn't recorded that way. It was an edit that was done because probably Rich was like, you got to put a pause there. And so we just like literally when it was being mixed, we just cut the music out for that section, and so that the chorus would come in harder. So,
and it really does. That like it's one of the standout parts of that song for me is just how hard that chorus hits after the bridge. So good call on Rich's part.
Make it real quick about that video. That was one of the greatest experiences gone terribly wrong for me personally.
Why is that?
I showed up to the shoot like really early in the morning. It was just like a one-day affair at like some green screen studio in LA. And as soon as I get there, within like 5 to 10 minutes, I come down with a fever.
Oh.
And like I had gotten the flu right before we start doing this video. And like it was such a nightmare for me because at that point I'm playing drums and I'm the one that has to really look like I'm playing in time to the song. And like I remember when we were set up, they just had like one PA speaker blasting the song in my face, and it just wasn't it wasn't cutting it because maybe for one, I wasn't used to doing that sort of thing yet, and I was feeling awful. So it was such an awkward experience. And then, of course, all that acting and stuff, and all those people that were in the video, and it just being this weird fake grass field and a green screen. It was just so like, what is this going to look like later?
Right.
And of course,
it's going to look moody.
It's going to look very dated when you watch it in 2020.
Aaron, you need to go watch it. You haven't seen it. You should go watch it.
Yeah,
It's
I'll
fantastic.
I'll look it up tomorrow.
It's a memorable video. Let's get into the next one that we're going to talk about, which is Death in Numbers. Now, thankfully, you corrected something on here, because it's been forever since I've looked at the track listing, but at least on Apple Music, it's wrong.
Yes.
They've got songs swapped. And so I'd written, what did you say? It's Death in Numbers and Where Did You Go, right?
Yeah.
Are those? Yeah.
They're
and
switched.
So, yeah, which is funny because, like, Where Did You Go? The chorus is obviously drilling that name into your head, right?
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it didn't dawn on me when I was like writing down songs. Like, oh, I love this song, and then you had mentioned which songs you wanted to pick. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then you're like, oh, those are actually swapped. Like this, this is the one that starts this way. I'm like, oh, good. We're actually liking the same song. We want to talk about the same
Sweet.
song. It's just I have the wrong title here. So, yeah, Aaron, real quick, why don't you share your thoughts on this one, and let's see if you listened to the right one.
Yeah, well, I have Death in Numbers / Where Did You Go? So I'm not sure which, because I listened and then I went back to just the text you send David saying the songs, and I was like, oh, which? Because I listened on Spotify, so I was like, oh, is it normal on here then? And
yeah, is it right on Spotify?
It's wrong on Spotify. It's wrong on both.
Okay, so anyways, well, whatever song I listened to had really good melodies and harmonies again. Like that's what stood out to me, and I've said it lots of times. Just great vocals, and that just it adds so much to a song to have those things stand out. And so that was the standout parts for me on the song.
If it's the right one. Do you remember if, because like this song, this is one of the most memorable songs on the album for me, because I think it really encapsulates everything that you guys were doing at that time, because it literally has everything dynamically in this song, right? Like, what do we got? It's quiet, it's loud. That's pretty standard.
Yeah.
There's again the near like whisper singing, different weird stuff going on.
Oh yeah.
There's also screaming in this song, which is different for you guys, because I don't, outside of, like maybe a yelling, like gang vocal sort of thing, I don't know if you guys had any points where there was legit just like straight up screaming, and it's so heavy at points. I can just think of, I think if you want to call it the bridge or whatever, where the guitars just hit that one chord, but just like da da, like just kind of drive on it. It's so big, but yeah, why don't you share why this is one of your, I mean, maybe those are all the reasons why this is one of your favorite songs. It's just, it does it all, and it does it so, it's almost like it's a song that goes like the next step, you go, what are they going to do next? What are they going to do? It's, from one piece to the next is so good.
I must have listened to the wrong song, because I don't remember those parts.
Yeah, now you need to go listen to, well, I guess on Spotify and Apple Music, it's listed as Where Did You Go? But that's actually Death in Numbers. You got to listen to it. You'll know it once you hear it, but it's such a great song.
I also wrote Loud, Quiet, Loud in my notes.
Yes.
But yeah, I think I love this song an extremely large amount, because it really does encapsulate whatever writing and working dynamic and that energy that was going on between Max and Jeremy and I feel like it is the most perfect representation on this song in particular. And what you were saying about it has everything, I kind of feel like this is a song that if we were to bring all of our influences into one song to ever represent this band, it would be this one, I guess.
Right on. Yeah.
But the screaming, they are gang vocals. They're a couple of our friends. I brought them up earlier in this the band In Control. They're like they're truly like to me they're like the one of the best, if not the best, punk hardcore band to ever come out of Oxnard. And the singer of that band, Ryan Fredette, is one of Max's best friends. And we just really, really wanted to get him on a No Motiv song. And so we had him, our friend Aaron Belcher, who also played in another hardcore band with Max back in the day for a while called Stand Your Ground. And then our friend Brandon. We just had like, we were recording all these vocals here in Orange County where I think Aaron and Brandon were living here at the time, but Ryan had to drive from Oxnard. It just like, we really wanted to represent all these things that meant something to us, even though it was just a bunch of dudes screaming bloody murder into the microphone.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this also has like the weird backwards stuff very much. This is by far, in terms of band influences from, obviously there's very obvious ones that we've spoken about numerous occasions about, but with those punk bands, once we started touring heavily and riding in a van and spending a lot of time with each other, specifically around this era, we were really, really, really loving listening to Neurosis and the band Garbage.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think we really wanted to bring this weird sci-fi eeriness that Garbage possesses and his crazy haunting heaviness of Neurosis. And so that part that you were talking about with like the it wasn't a thing that we had ever done in the past, and now it's very commonplace. We tune a guitar down to like extremely low tuning, which is very popular now, but maybe not as popular back then. And it just added to that pad of distortion and overdrive and heaviness. And, I think that just whenever I listen to that song, I feel like if I was to go to the grave feeling, did I accomplish anything? I'd be like, at least I made Death in Numbers with my friends.
Yeah. And then they mislabeled it on all the streaming services, so no one is actually.
Yeah. Thankfully,
That's amazing.
Thankfully, that doesn't drive me absolutely crazy, but it is annoying every time I look at it. But whatever.
Yeah, no doubt. And can someone not just like fix that, or is it just like so low on someone's radar that it doesn't get
I
fixed?
think it's that. I think it's very not important to anybody except for the three of us.
Yeah. All right, let's get into another one then. We're going to talk about, and you brought this one up a few minutes ago, Audition. Okay, so I don't know that I've ever, you mentioned the movie Audition. I don't think I've ever seen it. So is that what the song's about, or what's the deal there?
Yeah. So while we were making this record, my brother showed this movie to me, and I ended up, I don't know if he shared it to all of us at the same time or if I watched it first and then I passed it on to them, to Max and Jeremy, but it's a movie made by Takashi Miike, who's known well for the movies Ichi the Killer and Battle Royale. He's like classic super violent slasher gory filmmakers. But Audition, I always tell this to people, it's a love story. And it's funny because I actually I asked my friend in Australia if she would like to watch it with me at the same time, and I hadn't seen the movie in at least 5 years. And so at the time of me asking her if she'd be into watching it, and me saying that it's a love story, and me thinking it would be really funny to her to tell her this, we ended up watching the movie, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so much more like fucked up than I remember this movie being. And I don't really want to talk about the movie itself. It is a joke to say that it's a love story, even though it's technically kind of a love story. But like I said, it's made by this dude who's known for gore, and it goes there. But anyway, the song it really impacted us, or the movie really impacted us, and is one of our favorite movies of all time. And Jeremy wanted to write an ode to the movie. And I think I wanted to bring this song up also because this song was not written with me on drums. So Jeremy wrote it on bass. It starts on bass. It's the downstroking thing. Yeah. It's a total Jeremy song.
I was gonna ask because the opening riff on this song, I've never been sure what it is. Like, so is it just all bass or is it layered? Like there's
that's just bass.
It's beautiful. It sounds great.
And then Max played drums on the album, and whenever we would play this song live, which I do not think it ever went well. It never went over well with the audience. Right. I think we've thoroughly weirded people out every time we did it because we would play it. We would get off of our instruments and switch to play this one song.
Okay.
But I just love that we just didn't give a flying fuck about anything. And even though we have our roles in the band, we wanted to make a song where we switched. And so, the guitar work on that song, I think I came up with some of those ideas beforehand, but by the time we get to the second chorus, that's like a one taker of just jamming on the guitar, I think. I think there are 2 tracks of guitar, but like the one that's most prominent in the mix, that's just like trying to vibe out, you know?
Yeah. I love it. Like I love that it actually stays quiet. And sort of mellow for the whole song. Aaron, did you have some thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, it's funny that I was inspired by a movie because one of my notes literally says, "Sounds like a song that could be in a movie."
Perfect.
Which shows that the song brings more to mind, than just the music. It makes me start to think of something bigger, like what could this song add to make something else more dramatic? And so I think you achieved what you were hoping for, being inspired by a movie. It kind of brought to mind, I don't know if you know the band, The Beautiful Mistake. They were,
I heard of them.
Kind of a older kind of rock, emo, indie band.
For sure, yeah.
So that's what I kind of thought of, kind of the start of the song. And, the vocals bring kind of a really unique kind of haunting vibe, as you've mentioned, to the song. And it's a really different and dynamic song for sure.
We did some weird stuff on that song.
You said you played guitar on that song? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because one of my notes was just like how much I loved just like the delicate kind of guitar that was going on.
Nice.
And, like listening with headphones, especially, just kind of absorbing it. It's a nice sort of shift on the album. To, like I said, to just stay quiet like that, to stay kind of more, it's a nice quiet but full band song, right? Like it's not like it's just a single guitar type thing. It's the full band. It's pretty great. But let's move into the last song then that we're going to talk about, which is Brand New Day. This has long been one of my favorites on this album. And I think it's just how, that opening guitar riff on that song, it just kind of kicks you right off, and it just sort of goes into it. Like, and you talked about the music video earlier, because I can remember, I'm not sure which Vagrant DVD it was, because I did have a couple, but like watching that video on repeat, just because I'm a sucker for music videos where it's just the band in, like, whether it's their actual jam space or a jam space, just kind of like playing in close quarters. But I've always had one question about that video, and that's who won the basketball game.
No one.
No one hit a basket, I don't think, in the whole video.
Probably not. I really don't think anybody made a basket the entire time.
Yeah.
That was our practice space. That is where we wrote everything, that room. And that's where we did record some of the vocals for the record and all that stuff. So yeah, it is a special place to us, and that building still exists. We don't obviously have that room anymore, but funny, the new song was recorded, the vocals and guitars were recorded like down the hall from that room because one of our friends has a practice space in the same building. But yeah, that song, if I try to forget about all the journey the song took and the journey we took during this song's existence, I'm able to enjoy it. But there's been so many strange things and like moments in this band's existence that kind of circulate around that song, so it's kind of hard to fully connect with it at its root. But I do remember when we first wrote it, it was like, it felt like a really special song, you know, when we wrote it. We've recorded that song so many times. I demoed it.
Right.
The first demos we made, like that whole weird, awkward sounding Bad Religion-y thing that I was talking about.
Yeah.
We recorded that with Steve Evans, which I was like, I get to record with Steve Evans. This is fucking awesome. He's made some of my favorite records like Snapcase and Saves the Day and stuff. And if I was ever to pinpoint two producers that were a huge influence on making me realize what it takes to be a studio musician, it was Steve Evans and John Feldman. Because, and no knock on Trevor or Chad, they pretty much like, they let the band just do their thing for the most part, those dudes. And I'm very thankful for that type of experience. But Steve Evans is the first person that ever taught me that the idea of all downstrokes just sounds punchier, fuller, better for a lot of like applications in playing. And I just remember with both of those dudes and the tempo that Brand New Day is at, both times I was like, you really think I can play this fast, all downstrokes? Are you kidding me? And like, that has always stuck with me, and like I've decided to punish other musicians with that kind of mentality and being in the engineer's seat. But yeah, that's probably the song that kind of established this new sense of energy that was a little bit more mature, I guess, compared to Diagram, because that is the song that's like the first song that survived, that made it onto Daylight, that existed right after the Diagram era of the band, you know, with Pat still in the band and us having recorded it obviously for that video.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that always kind of confused me with the video, because in this one you're on bass, and then in Into the Darkness you're on drums.
Yeah.
And I can remember watching and not really like knowing at that time, you know, sort of what had gone on. I was like, what is happening here? Like, this is, so it's just kind of interesting to see sort of the, I guess, the two eras of the band.
Two eras for sure.
In that regard. Aaron, what were your thoughts on this song?
Yeah, it's got a great chorus again. I love how, you know, the big guitars and drums fit together on this one. It's not necessarily anything complex, but I just thought it was well thought out and complements each other. For the bridge, I like that little bit of guitar flair kind of before the guitar cuts out with just the bass rolling. I thought that was really cool. And then when it goes back into the chorus, it kind of has that little kind of fade into where it kind of drops down and kind of then fades back in. And yeah, this is another song that I listened to again right after a second time, just because it was such a cool song and it had lots of standout parts on it.
So did you say, Roger, that it was for sure or possibly about kind of like the current situation at that time with Vagrant Records?
It was kind of about that, yeah.
Yeah, because it's interesting to me because it takes a very similar vibe lyrically for myself anyways to actually the song So What off of Sadness. And so part of me kind of likes to envision that it's about the same person, but the insight that you've given is, maybe not so.
The funny thing about these angst filled songs that the band has made, they're usually always, not usually, they're always like personal type of relationship songs.
Yeah.
And it's funny to think about like a lot of the lyrical content and the journey that we've been on with as friends with each other and the label. It's like, oh, that's crazy to have these like really angry songs, and we are actually really close friends with this person that this song might be about, but it sounds really angry. And then, like a Brand New Day, thinking about it being about like label frustrations or just that sort of idea. Like we are all very extremely thankful for everything that Vagrant has ever done for us. So, you're okay. Yeah, it's funny you bring up that dropout in the song, like that little dynamic shift in Brand New Day. A little tidbit about the record itself. It was actually mixed twice. The first time it was mixed by Chad Blinman, who mixed Sadness and Diagram, and we sat and punished him at the studio for like however many days it took him to mix it. It was just us hanging out with him in LA, and we got every little trick that we wanted in the book, all of the nuances that we wanted to exploit, and like, I'm pretty sure we just punished the shit out of him, and he mixed it, and we were really happy with it. And then the label was like, we should probably get like a radio mix for Into the Darkness. It'd probably be good. So we had this guy, Chris Shaw, mix that one song. And the label was so stoked on how that came out that they were like, we should probably just have him mix the whole record. And at the time we were like, that song does sound really powerful. Why not? Sure, if you really want to do, if you guys truly feel like this is the move we got to do, sure, let's do it. And so we sent him the files. He mixed it. He did a bunch of things in the mix, like countless things. We typed up an elaborate email and sent it to this guy. And in hindsight, and now that like I have spent a great deal of my life as an engineer now, I'm thinking about those notes that we made him, and I'm like, oh man, this is nitpicking to the highest degree. There is no way on earth any mix engineer would ever entertain like 90% of what we want to have changed. And like, and back then, like now when you're mixing a record for somebody, so much of it's done on the computer and you can make so many changes pretty easily. I'm sure back then, whatever he had to do was like, I'm not going to spend 6 hours just for this like 5-second thing that you guys want. Right. So if you listen to two songs on the record rather closely, Brand New Day, in that dropout where it's just the one guitar and like the weird kind of lo-fi drums, that moment of the song is actually the Chad Blinman mix. Because the Chris Shaw mix at that moment of the song, he did some really strange effect thing that like nobody liked. And so when the album went to mastering and our manager was at mastering in San Francisco, he's like, I'm going to have this dude fix this. He's just going to fly in this one part from Chad's mix and it's going to be, this is what the song's going to sound like. Yeah. And cool. In that song in particular, we're like, that's perfect. He did it. Yeah. But if you listen to Audition, there's a dropout that happens after the last chorus. and it goes back to the bass by itself, and it's like the kick drum that comes in.
Yeah.
If you listen to that section, on the Chris Shaw mix, I'm hitting the hi-hat to keep time, but it was never meant to be in the mix of the song. And so we, again, took the Chad Blinman mix for that couple seconds of the song and flew it in. And so if you listen to those two songs now, I guarantee you, especially on Audition, you'll be able to notice it.
That's cool. That's cool. I did want to say, as we wrap up kind of with this record, that you had mentioned on Diagram just kind of about the track sequencing, especially when it came to picking your closer. I feel like the track sequencing on this record, on Daylight, is so good, because the record starts strong, but I also find it's kind of got this thing where it brings you in and gets better as you go. And there's a whole stretch of songs, which we covered a few of them, because it goes specifically from Death in Numbers in my notes through Brand New Day, like through those songs. It's just a good chunk of songs showing off the different sides of the band. So that was something I actually noticed more now, not even so much when I was kind of first falling in love with the record, but so that's pretty awesome. But yeah, I did want to say thanks, man, for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Taking the time.
Dude,
kind of a different take on our normal episode. I was like, why not reach out and see if he's down? And lo and behold, he's down. So sweet.
I greatly appreciate you guys even wanting to make an episode talking about anything we've ever done. So I appreciate you both.
Now we've done 2 of them technically.
Yes.
So there you go. But yeah, thanks again for doing it, man. And did you want to throw out any social media links or anything?
Oh geez, I mean, we got the No Motiv official Instagram, which we try to update it with something, if anything relevant's ever happening. Please check out the new Nardcore for Life compilation on Indecision Records. We're to the second press of that vinyl now. It's available wherever you listen to music digitally. First new No Motiv song in almost a decade, with Pat back in the band playing drums, and that was a lot of fun to do. And I'll just close by saying that Max just sent us a new riff like about a week ago.
Huh.
So, hey man, you never know what could happen.
You never know. There it is. Well, thanks again, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show, friends. Just a reminder, if you want to get more, if you like what we do here and you want to support us, we're on Patreon now. We've also got merch. I didn't mention that at the beginning of the show. We've got t-shirts that you can get now as well. One of them actually has our faces on it while we're riding a horse. It's pretty epic. All those details are at our website, growingpunkpod.com. You can find our Patreon there. You can find the merch there. You can find everything we've got going on there. And of course, follow us on our social medias at growingpunkpod on Instagram and Twitter. That'll do it then. So bye-bye.
Audition is such a brilliant film because the whole movie is a build-up to the last 15 minutes.